All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first event of our three-part series on systems innovation in the agricultural sector in South Africa. I'm excited to be part of the team of facilitators who will guide you through this exciting journey in exploring new alternatives, specifically in smallholder farming in South Africa. Boitu, can I just ask you to just drop the Miro board link for everybody to follow on the Miro board?
Showing that now.
Okay. So my name is Sheldon Subeb, everybody. I am part of the Cape Town Hub, SI Cape Town Hub, as a facilitator together with Linda Kuvea, Boitum Konde, Asen Ngombe, as well as Abili and Lee, who are unfortunately not here. So this is really going to be an interactive session, and we will be using the Miro board to engage everybody's thoughts on our concept. But as a starter, we thought we would maybe just check in with everybody in terms of where you are dialing in from, as well as your location, so that we know a little bit about everybody on the call today. So if you can just access the Miro board, you will be able to just grab a sticky note and just plot it on our box there and let us know where you are dialing in from. Let's maybe give that 30 seconds to a minute and then we shall continue. Okay. Thank you guys for once again coming. We really appreciate your time, and I hope that it's going to really be an engaging session. So we will just be moving on to the next slide. And this is really just a sort of background in terms of why we are doing this specific learning series, focusing on innovative agricultural systems for smallholder farmers in South Africa. We all know the global demand for food is rising, with some even claiming a total increase between 59 to 98 by 2050. The question then begs, will we be able to meet the demand? The agricultural sector is central to creating employment opportunities, fostering economic growth, reducing poverty, and improving food security in South Africa. As such, this is a significant call to action to promote food safety and security, rural and township development, and economic transformation across the agricultural value chain. The South African agricultural narrative in and of itself is complex. There is no solution that will replace the crumbling infrastructure, the unreliable power systems, or a declining market by night. As a result, the agricultural sector in South Africa is mostly dominated by large commercial farming, leaving smallholder farmers in the deep rural areas at a disadvantage. They face numerous challenges such as poor access to land, markets, inputs, and most importantly, financing. However, this is just a tip of the iceberg and much more complex than we can imagine. Therefore, we've designed this series to help us understand the deep structures and dynamics and overall functioning of smallholder farming in South Africa. We will use this series of events to explore new ways to address the challenges faced by smallholder farmers. And this can, as a result, be a stepping stone towards identifying high leverage points in redesigning smallholder farming operations to achieve the necessary outcomes. Okay. The next slide, please. So in terms of structure, through this series, we will be unpacking 4 main modules of the Systems Innovation Toolkit, which will equip us with fundamental ideas, tools, and methods in the pursuit of systemic change and innovation. The series is based on a case study carried out by Riasa Co in Makutumba Tamanga municipality located in the Limpopo province in South Africa. The municipality's economy is primarily based on agriculture, with large commercial farms dominating that specific sector. However, smallholder farmers in the area face significant challenges, including everything that we've mentioned, access to land, resources, as well as financing. So basically what we will be doing throughout the three event series is we will be framing or reframing the challenge, looking at smallholder farming as a very complex, interconnected, and emergent challenge rather than just seeing the parts inside the agricultural system. We will then look at exploring how systems mapping can be useful in understanding the state of the smallholder farming system in Makutudamanga municipality through its deep structures, dynamics, and its overall functioning. In the last event of this series, we will explore how a well-functioning ecosystem for agricultural sector development can create an enabling environment for farmers and other stakeholders to increase productivity, profitability, improve food security, promote rural development, and contribute to the economic growth and social welfare. So in other words, we'll be going through all of those different parts as we continue on this learning series. Okay. Today's session, however, is going to be focusing on reframing the challenge of smallholder farming as a means to innovate in the agricultural systems. We will be focusing on reframing it as a system, and this is what we will be doing in the next 50 minutes. In this session, we will cover the introduction and introductory concepts and ideas on systems thinking. We will also look at certain canvases that we will be making use of to at least open our level of thinking and awareness at a systemic level. So this is basically what we will be doing today. Just for any Zoom housekeeping, if you have any burning questions, please do not hesitate to just drop it in the chat, and we will make some time at the end to just respond to them. If you aren't saying anything, please mute yourself as the session is being recorded. Once again, thank you very much for joining our session, and that is my end of the introductory course, and I would like to then give it over to Linda, who will kick us off with some key guiding principles on systems thinking.
Thank you very much, Sheldon, for wonderful introduction to our series and the event of today. My name is Linda Gouveia, and I'm a facilitator in this SI Cape Town Hub. To kickstart my presentation, I'm just going to ask Asen to play a very short video that will help us have a little bit of understanding of the challenges that smallholder farmers are facing in the region. Thank you, Asen.
But just as vast as the potential are the challenges. So run us through it. What are some of the challenges that smallholder farmers face today?
Yeah, so in sub-Saharan Africa, smallholder farmers are under more pressure to produce more with the little that they have. And part of the challenges which smallholder farmers are facing today is low productivity. And this is mainly driven by the fact that they lack access to quality inputs. And sometimes affordability becomes in a very big factor. So access to finance coming in as another major challenge which smallholder farmers are facing. Again, there are a lot of knowledge gaps. You find the farmers sometimes don't understand the basics of production in terms of how they can really, really improve their yields, and also how they can maximize in the small production areas that they have. And of course, definitely that also coupled with the challenges which come with accessibility of markets.
So the picture that we get is that there are vast gaps between smallholder farmers and commercial setups. How do we bridge these gaps? How do we make smallholder farmers more efficient, more productive?
Thank you, Asen. So how do we make smallholder farmers more efficient and more productive? This is the question that various stakeholders are seeking to contribute to solutions faced by smallholder farmers. They have to answer. And given the list of challenges that Evelyn gave in this short video, it clearly is not an easy question at all, and there is no simple answer. So, and this is where systems thinking becomes useful. And during this session, we're going to talk about a few concepts that can help us to start answering such a question. Next slide, please. So there are two ways to look at anything. We can look at things in parts or as a whole. And most of us have been taught to think in parts, which is known as analytical thinking. And with analytical thinking, we take something that is complex and then we try to break it down into smaller components and then study each of those components in order to understand what's going on. And talking about smallholder farming in South Africa, let's think of some components of smallholder farming. You can drop some in the chat if you think of any, like soil fertility, like water availability, finance, inputs, knowledge, or policy. These are some of the components. And using analytical thinking, we will look at the function of each of these components and then try to identify the problem and then propose a solution. So for example, providing capacity building for knowledge gaps, or providing finance for inputs and equipment. I'm seeing some comments here, distance from the market, yes, machinery, training. These are some of the challenges that we can think which are really components, and trying to look at these challenges in isolation and trying to find a solution for them is analytical thinking. And I'm not saying analytical thinking is a bad thing. Analytical thinking is it's good. It works when you are seeking to understand the internal workings of a particular component to increase its efficiency. But according to systems theory, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it is in the connections among the various components, the different parts, and the relationships among them that really signifies how smallholder farming as a whole can actually work. And this is holistic thinking. So to illustrate the importance of holistic thinking, Asen, can you please move on to the next slide, where we're going to talk about the famous parable of the blind man and the elephant. So this parable illustrates the idea that perception can be subjective and limited based on one's individual experiences and perspectives. So in this particular story, there's a group of blind men who encounter an elephant, and each of them holds a particular, touches a particular part, and then perceive it as something else besides the elephant. So one who holds the trunk and believe that it's a snake, the other one will touch the tusk and think that it's a spear, the other one will touch the leg and believe that it's a tree, and so on. None of them can see the whole elephant, and therefore each has a limited and incomplete understanding of what the elephant is. This can actually be applied to many situations where people have differing perspectives or limited information. For example, in the context of the challenges faced by smallholder farmers, a smallholder farmer may actually perceive the problem as being lack of inputs and equipment that limits their ability to production. And the Department of Agriculture may look at it as a problem of lack of infrastructure and resources to support agricultural development in rural areas. And in the case of South Africa, where we have an agriculture sector education and training authority, they may actually perceive the problem is lack of education or training. Someone mentioned in the chat there about training. They may look at it as a lack of training for smallholder farmers on sustainable farming practices. And each of these stakeholders, they are carrying a different perspective and a very limited understanding of the problem. And just like the blind man in the elephant illustration, to answer the question, how do we make smallholder farmers more efficient and productive? It's important to bring together all these different perspectives, understand that each of these challenges are actually interconnected, and work towards a more comprehensive and collaborative approach. And by working together, stakeholders can actually gain a more complete understanding of the challenges that smallholder farmers are facing. And then they can start now to develop solutions that are more effective and sustainable. Yeah. Next slide, please. Now, we're going to move on to another concept called ecosystem thinking. So ecosystem thinking is a way of thinking where individuals or organizations may be focused on their own goals, their own needs, and their own desires, and they don't consider the perspectives of others or a larger system in which they are operating. So this can be evidenced in our context here of smallholder farming by how various stakeholders in the agriculture sector work in silos to address what they are feeling as different organizations, that these are the most pressing challenges from their perspective. And this leads to a limited understanding of a complex issue, and it results in actions that have negative consequences for others or the broader system in which everybody is operating. Ecosystem thinking is actually linked to the previous parable that I mentioned in the previous slide, because both these concepts highlight the limitations of individual perspectives and the importance of considering a broader system and perspectives of others to actually address complex issues. And that leads us to the concept of ecosystem thinking, which is my next slide, and the opposite of ecosystem thinking. So ecosystem thinking emphasizes the interconnectedness and interdependence of various elements within a system. It recognizes the changes in one part of the system. Those changes can actually have a ripple effect in the rest of the system. So in the context of the challenges faced by smallholder farmers here in South Africa, ecosystem thinking can actually help to identify the complex and interconnected factors that are contributing to these challenges. And we can be able to develop more comprehensive and sustainable solutions. Next slide. So ecosystem thinking actually requires us to overcome some of the limitations, the flaws, the biases in our thinking that are resulting from our egoism, so as to see the system that we form part of and not to see ourselves as independent of the systems. So becoming a systems thinker is a commitment to an ongoing learning process of examining and trying to improve our thinking so that we can actually become better at seeing systems. And this all starts when we understand how we see the world and the existing limitations in our own reasoning as individuals. And then when we change the way we think, we then change the way we see things. And when we change the way we see things, the things that we see actually change. So, but these can sound really abstract when it's not put into practice. So our question now is, how do we do this? There are various systems thinking tools that are designed to support deeper thinking, to help us to understand any problem as a whole, as well as identify the actual cause and not just address the symptom. So I'm going to hand over to Arsene, who is going to take us through one of such tools that Riesako actually used in the case study that Sheldon mentioned in Makutudamaga municipality. And he would also take us through a very short exercise to help us put our hands to work and see how this tool actually works. So over to you, Arsene.
Thank you so much, Linda, for that beautiful presentation where you're setting up or presenting the different concepts that allows us to think in a systemic way. So following your presentation, and I believe I would like to welcome again everybody here. So I believe that we are all now on the same page, that's to understand that any given system has a purpose and it's comprised of structures incorporating feedback that inform its behavior. So the tool that I'm going to use to discuss today is the iceberg, because I feel that's the tool that can allow us to really go deeper and see different perspectives. As a reminder, as I'm speaking about system structure, I want us to keep in mind that whenever we think of this concept, we define it as the way in which the parts of a system are interconnected and or organized. And there's this quote by Edward Deming that I like a lot. The quote says that every system is perfectly designed or structured to get the results that it does. So if we look at the iceberg tool that I'm presenting there, the visual of an iceberg is an excellent metaphor for the process used to examine problems and solutions. Above the waterline of the iceberg is what is visible, what we all tend to focus on. And these are the events that every time there is something that occurs, we put our attention to it and try to focus, and for getting the opportunity to go further and understand what caused those events. So a deeper understanding of the system that produces day-to-day events actually lies below the waterline, as we see on the iceberg here. The system thinkers, they develop this understanding below the water surface by utilizing different tools and also using some habits to be able to understand this concept. So as I say, I'll draw on the iceberg model and share some of the tools at each level to examine how system structure can generate a particular behavior recognized as the issue. Starting at the pattern level, one of the tools that can be useful to get to these points and try and understand the patterns that we see that exist at the bottom of the events that we tend to focus is the behavior over time graph. This is a tool that can help people focus on the patterns of change over time rather than on isolated events. They measure change over time and show what happened in a system represented by the graph. I will talk about it later on. But as you can see from the second slide where we are, so here where I am, this is the behavior over time graph that I'm referring to. When you look at it, the y-axis provides the scale of what is changing. And the x, the one at the bottom, shows the timeline. And the line here of the graph tells the story of what variables or elements that are being grafted to try and understand those patterns. So if you go down at the structure level, we have also a few tools like causal connection cycle mapping, or causal loop diagrams, or stock and flow. Systems thinking, because we know that it's all about being able to make causal connection and identify interdependencies in system in order to see the bigger picture. Systemic intervention, therefore, the one that really try and apply these things. Systemic intervention are the one that see interdependencies and explore causal relation and anticipate the effect. So again, at the structure level, everything, we need to keep in the back of our mind that everything happens for a reason. So when things go well, or it's good to know why. On the other hand, when situations go bad also, it's equally important to understand the causal attributes that lead to disappointing result. And these tools can help really to examine a system and identify the level of action needed to generate the desired behavior that we want. And at the bottom here, the mental level, the mental model, the tool that can be useful at this place is like the ladder of inference. The ladder is an analog used to understand how perception and mental model develop unconsciously, because that's the most important part. Most of the things that happen among or between our society, it's just developed like that without us really paying so much attention, and that determines how we think and which later on shape our behavior. So if you have to look at the ladder of inference, as you see on the graph here, starting at the bottom of the ladder is the information and experiences around us that we could observe. The first step up, let me try and zoom a bit. Yeah. The first step up the ladder are the detailed notice that we tend to notice regarding our choosing information or experience. And the next level is about the meaning we add to the detail we notice. Our personal or cultural background, all these things influence the meaning we attach. And then the third step here is where beliefs are now developed based on the meaning we add into it. This is often where conclusions are made on what we observe. And finally, that leads us to take actions based on our belief. So this all happen in a blink of an eye beneath the surface of our awareness. The belief that emerge over time influence the detail we pay attention to as we go up the ladder, as I'm showing here. Again here, if I can zoom again, the arrow at the right of the ladder shows how belief influence what we choose to notice, and the R next to the arrow means that our belief can reinforce what we notice, and this causal connection is a recursive relationship. The stronger our beliefs, the more influence they have on what we notice as we go, and that's actually what determines the kind of mental model. So I will go quickly to tell you a little bit, as I said, in terms of a concrete example and how we went about it. I'll use an example of the iceberg model that we use to facilitate the discussion about poor communication within a farmer cooperative. What we noticed as we were working on the project was that there was lack of information flow between farmers and the strategic partners around issues of profit sharing and market information. So let me mention this, give this a background to say that farmers in the locality where we work register as a cooperative because they have access to land, but then they lack also skills and they lack resources to start working, and they bring in a strategic partner to come and work with them who in a way will provide inputs, will provide capacity building, and they work together to produce and share the profit. As we were engaging, because the model that we were developing was now a composition of many cooperatives at many villages, different villages, in total actually 8 villages, to be registered as sub-scheme or composed as sub-scheme and to be registered as primary cooperatives. Then together they come and create a secondary cooperative. So already, because in the previous intervention there was issue around communication, then it became a challenge. We had to unpack a little bit to understand how, if it failed to work in a smaller structure, how will it be possible to imagine having that model in a bigger structure where you have a secondary cooperative made of 8 primary cooperatives. So we had to try and unpack that situation, try and understand how we can go about it to avoid problems in future. So we started, obviously, the patterns or trends, the second, at this level, we went beyond what we initially observed, and we begin to look for patterns and trends. Some questions that we asked was like, what has been happening as is doing be working in that area? How did the previous cooperative agreement address the issue of communication? How were the issues addressed by the steering committee, because the cooperative is a governing body that has the role to make sure that the cooperative is operating properly. So the questions were around how those issues were addressed in the past, the roles of different stakeholders playing. And the behavior over time graph help us really to see things over the period of time where we were looking at the issue of consistency or issue of communication at the y-axis, and the timing that it took them to the point where the cooperative had to collapse at some point. And what we noticed as we were facilitating this discussion to see that during the period, the following year of their production of operating as cooperative, around February, March, May, and up until August, that's where they started having issues around miscommunication, lack of information flow when it comes to profit sharing. And if you think about it, in terms of seasonality, this is the time where they sell after harvesting seasons, they start selling. And that's where the issue becomes. And we had to sit with a group of people and stakeholders to get them understand that let's redefine our roles here. You know, if you're a steering committee or you're a management team that is working, how do you work together to be able that these issues can be prevented in future as we scale? So that's the example of how we use that. So then we went another step further, as I explained at the structural level, to examine the issue further. Here we look at the structure that we're generating the trending behavior that the cooperative was experiencing. And we use, as I said, causal loop map, SQL map to try and clarify what was written in the communications, the policies that they had in place in terms of governing the cooperative, you know, issues around trust, regularity, when it comes to working together to produce or even to come and report as they come report on the progress that they are making. So some of the questions that we had to ask here is as to what extent the function of the cooperative structure was causing those patterns to repeat itself. And people were sharing ideas, like, for example, like not enough opportunity for open or regular communication among the team, or sometimes there is issues around policy guiding of the cooperative that were not well understood and utilized by all parties. And people also mentioned issues around quality of professional relationship that impact trust and collegiality. And those are some of the things that were affecting, that were influencing the issue of communication. And then we went a step further down, as I explained, with the ladder of inference at this level to try and tackle the mental model. So at the deepest of the level of the iceberg, that's when we started talking about mental model, where both contributing to trending behavior and impacting the ability to solve communications. So here we discover a lot of things, issues like more negative than positive communication, no one talked to each other, reluctance to speak, you know, no one listened, and it's emerged that some people needed more information than others, and some people also have different level of trust, you know, and that's how, in a way, I can talk about how these tools were quite useful as we were doing the project. So as I said, the iceberg as a tool, as a model, can be used to really understand the structure of a system, because the structure is what defines the kind of behavior that people have. And when you start going to the different level of the iceberg model, you can be able to use also different tools to be able to unpack so that your intervention is seen beyond, it's kind of coming more non-linear and try and drive a proper change on the ground. So yeah, that's some of the tools that we use and what I thought I should share with you. And I'm checking time, we left with 20 minutes. So quickly, we're gonna jump. As Linda said, we're gonna try and do an exercise. The exercise is going to be based on what we've already discussed through the iceberg. So I'm gonna ask everybody now to grab their sticky note and come on this board. What we're going to do here is we're going to use our own understanding to exercise our thinking, to try and unpack the issue of lack of growth for smallholder farmers. So whenever we think of lack of growth, what are the things that come first in mind? And we're gonna use the iceberg, the different stages of the iceberg. We've got questions crafted for each stage. The first question I would like to ask is at the level of event. When we think about lack of growth for smallholder farmers, what do we see happening in relation to this? So please join me, grab your sticky notes and post your ideas. We can take about 2 minutes to do that. And then we move to the next block. You can also feel free to start working from the bottom, but basically the questions are here. Following the presentation that I made on these logical tools, if you have to start thinking, how do we address these issues? What do we see? What has been happening, or what is changing? And what are the trends that we perceive taking place as we think of the growth of lack of growth, for smallholder farmers? Okay. Aging population without generational replacement. That's interesting. Poor infrastructure. Somebody is talking about aging population without generational replacement. Can you please unmute yourself and expand a little bit more? I would like to hear your thought on that. And I know this is something that is probably very contextual.
Yeah, sure, that was me. Now I could be mistaken because I'm speaking mainly from the US markets, but as far as I know, most major farmers are hitting certain limits in their capacity to continue to sustain their work. They're aging, and their children don't want to pursue that as a line of work. They want to move into the city and find more prosperous, quote, work. So that's what I was thinking.
Okay, a good one. Thanks. poor infrastructure, discrimination of rural farmers. Yeah, that's very true. We find it also here.
Yeah, maybe I can also say something there to comment around the issue of young people. I think there's a decreased interest, like young people not seeing the value of farming as a business, and trying to look for other opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, totally. That's very true. Especially, yeah, in communities where I worked recently, Linda, that was the key issue. Definitely. Yeah. Monopolies, access to appropriate technology, very true.
Nicholas, do you mind sharing some of the insights that you posted on the board?
Yeah, one of them is related to access to appropriate technology, which is kind of being addressed in the layer below, where things are changing, but without access to, for argument's sake, smartphone technology. So if you take not necessarily a farmer, but a fisherman, if he has access to smartphone technology, he can arrange for the sale of his fish on his way in from the catch. So, it helps with being put in touch with the markets. It helps get better prices. It helps get the produce to the right place at the right time. And then the other one is about monopolies. I mean, small farmers have a hell of a time trying to compete against the big commercial farmers, some of whom dominate the markets. So they're definitely not going to get the kinds of prices they need for the level of input to the crops they're producing.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's very true. And what we are proposing in the project that we did was, how do we start building collaboration between subsistence farmers and commercial farmers here? Because
can I chip in there? Because I many years ago, I used to work for Tongaat Hewlett Sugar, and part of the project I had to look after was the small growers.
Yes.
And they, at that stage, and look, time has evolved since then, but at that stage, what they used to do is they used to create repositories of shared equipment so that a small farmer can't afford a tractor, for argument's sake. So they would provide access to a tractor for 10 or 15 farmers, and then they would share in the use of the heavy machinery. They would provide a centralized place for storing and securing fertilizer and fuel and stuff like that. So and then they would also provide training and expertise from the large commercial farms. So they tried to support as best they could. It was, I wouldn't call it a raging success, but it was enough for the farmers to be able to survive on and have a little bit of prosperity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, just to add on what you just said here, as we worked here, we were thinking more about, one of the recommendations that we gave was to build those kind of collaboration, although some people might think it's not realistic, but the reality also is commercial farmers here, especially in Limpopo, where we work in Mapudutamaga municipality, or even in South Africa as a country, they've broad access to the market, and often they source their product from subsistence farmers. So the idea was like, how do we now start creating a space for those kind of collaboration and exchanges where we can build that value chain, giving space to everybody to be able to benefit from what they do. So the process is being, their recommendation is being considered. That's another stage where people will now start having to bring those people together to start talking and exploring those ideas. Cool. So
Yeah,
yes, go ahead, Linda.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm not sure if I'm not dragging you backwards here, but just to comment also on what and agree with what Nicholas mentioned about competition with commercial farmers. And I think just to add perspective around the particular crops that are actually being produced. So you realize that policy has actually supported particular crops. So there are crops like maize, which the government will happily buy from farmers. and their commercial farmers were able to produce these at a very large scale. But there are other crops that we could actually explore, indigenous crops that smallholder farmers can actually produce with lower costs, lower inputs and everything. So it's just throwing some spanner in the works there around the particular crops that we are actually competing with the commercial farmers.
Can I just throw a thought out here? And I'm not quite sure which layer it falls into, but what has become evident is that small farmers who grow using a mixed crop approach, where they have multiple crops existing in the same space, are much more resistant to the impact of climate change than the big monocrop farmers. So as part of the country's food security strategy, what it should be doing is promoting the use of small farmers as a buffer of sorts against potential damage to the massive crops. You think of a massive maize farmer or a sugar farmer, if a virus or a bug or something comes in, their entire crop gets wiped out. But apparently the farmers who are following a more traditional, and I'm talking about traditional in the sense of mixing all these different types of crops together in one space approach, are much more resilient. And this apparently happened when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and the big farms got really badly damaged, and the small farmers who were adopting this approach were able to survive the fallout from the hurricane.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool. Thanks for that contribution, Nicholas. I'm checking, we left with 10 minutes to go before we get to the end of our session. I saw people posted some ideas here. So we talk about the structure, we talk about mental models. I think from what I see people are posting, it shows that we are all in the same place, that we really need to be able to go below the surface of the iceberg to try and understand the system we want to intervene. The series, as Sheldon said in the beginning, is to help the grow, to help think how smallholder farmers can actually grow from subsistence to commercial farmer, but that's something that can't happen in a day like that. It needs to be unpacked further, and the purpose of this exercise was to get us started thinking of those steps that need to be taken into consideration as we proceed. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions and input. I'm going to hand over now to Sheldon for the next steps. Sheldon, back to you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Once again, we can't thank you enough for joining today's session. Really, I think it was a real foundation setter, really, to help us ease into the entire 3-event series. As a reminder, this is the first event of a 3-part series. The next series is the next event is looking at mapping the challenge. So we have sort of reframed some of the sort of concepts that we are easily inclined to concluding in terms of what is really happening, and we have sort of built a much more deeper understanding. And looking at the conversations that we've just had, there is more to what meets the eye in terms of how we can improve the smallholder farming system. Okay, so like I said, this is a build up to the mapping event, which is going to be happening on the 27th of April. I hope everybody was able to register for that. If you haven't, it is on all our LinkedIn pages, as well as our hub room. So you please, I think it always just helps to register, and in the event that you've forgotten what it when the date is, it sort of reminds you and sends you an email to tell you that the event is about to start. All right, finally, we do have a quick check-in with everybody in terms of today's session. If you can maybe just pick a sticky note and let us know how the session was today, so that we can sort of improve on anything you may feel was maybe lacking in today's session. If not, that is also fine. Yeah. So while everybody is populating that, I just want us to remember that you can reach out to us, the SI Systems Innovation Cape Town Hub, on all our socials, which is on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter under the name SI Cape Town Hub, as well as you are welcome to join our growing hub, which will basically host all of our events in one place. So if you are part of it, you shouldn't miss any of the things that we plan. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else from anybody, going once, twice. Once, thank you very much for joining our session. And please, we hope to see everybody back or for the mapping session. It's really just nice to sort of continue the conversation when we map it. So any of my colleagues want to say anything before we end the live?
Well, I would like to thank everyone for making your time to join us. And I hope, as Sheldon said, you enjoyed the conversation. So this was just us starting the discussion, like opening up our series. This is the next thing, as Sheldon said, we're going to present the systems map and we're going to talk about it. So we'll take the time to discuss what emerged from the project. And the whole idea will be to show how systems map, which I actually mentioned also as I was speaking at the structural level. We will be able to see it live and see how that was really useful for us to understand the dynamics in that space. So we're really looking forward to seeing you in the session. Please invite more people. Yeah, I see Nick.
Yes, please.
Sorry, before you run off, do we get access to the Miro board, or will it get chopped off as soon as the session is finished?
No, the Miro board will still be available if you save. If I hope, maybe, I don't know, Boyd, if you don't mind dropping the link again. So you will be able to access the Miro board.
Okay, I've opened it independently. I'm just not entirely sure. I guess I can't save it, can I?
If
you can just keep the link when you keep the
yes, link, if you save,
access it anytime.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you keep the link somewhere, you'll be able to access it anytime.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Yep. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining, and bye-bye.
Bye.